Hey everybody, welcome back to Retro Modding News, my weekly video where I talk about what's new and upcoming in the world of retro console modding. I'm trying something a little bit different this week. Normally I come up with these videos off the top of my head, but this week I've written a bunch of notes down here. This idea comes from Lon Seidman. I actually was at a Retro World panel where he talked about this is how he prepares for his videos. And I started to use OBS to record both my camera as well as the monitor here, so I don't have to edit that part after the fact. So let me know if you find any issues, and hopefully this produces a little bit of a better news video for everyone. First up this week is a new Nintendo Switch controller from 8BitDo called the Ultimate Controller. This controller features both Bluetooth as well as 2.4 GHz using an included USB dongle. Bluetooth means that this controller should be really good for Blue Retro. Blue Retro, if you don't know, is an open source Bluetooth controller project that is available on a bunch of different retro consoles. And because it has that included USB dongle, I think this should be a really good controller for Mister as well. It has a Nintendo style button layout, which makes it awesome for Super Nintendo, NES, Game Boy Advance, and a bunch of other Nintendo consoles. And it also has Hall effect sensors in the thumbsticks, which means that it shouldn't be affected by stick drift. And it includes this USB Type-C charging dock, which I think this is a really awesome plus for a controller. I know that a lot of people are already going to have the 8BitDo SN30 Pro Plus, but I think this controller is a lot more modern, something more like the Nintendo Switch controller, which to me personally, I'd probably choose to use the Pro controller over the SN30 Pro Plus. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon. I'm going to leave an affiliate link in the description. If you want to support the channel, you can pre-order one of these controllers using my affiliate link. Next up this week, if you subscribe to Castlemania Games newsletter, you might have seen an interesting teaser about a new Xbox Modchip from MakeMhz. It's kind of hidden down here. If we scroll down to the section about the Xbox HD Plus with Modchip section, the only real information we have that it says the MakeMhz team is going to give more information soon, but this is big news. The only information I've been able to gather about this is that one, it's not the OpenXenia mod chip that we already have for MakeMhz, and two is it won't ship until November of 2022. So we probably won't hear any more information about this for at least a couple of weeks to a month, but hopefully Dustin can share some more information with us soon. Next up this week, Aaron Peckler has announced a new internal Blue Retro adapter for the NES. It supports wired controller detection, which means that you should be able to intermix both wired controllers as well as Bluetooth controllers, and it will be able to sense which port the wire controller is in so that the other one will be the wireless one. Currently, this board is only going to work with the front-loading NES. I'm not sure if there are going to be plans for the top-loading NES or the Famicom at all, but let's take a quick look at the PCB here. It looks like this board will sit between the NES's controller ports and the NES motherboard, and it includes all the connectors that you need to connect this to your NES. It also looks like there's going to be a separate daughter board that has some control buttons as well as some status lights that will be housed inside of a 3D printed enclosure on the underside of the front-loading NES. Pre-orders for this internal NES Blue Retro adapter are going to start later on this month, and a portion of each sale is going to go to the creator of Blue Retro, Darth Cloud. I'm excited to hear some more details about this adapter. I really want to use these Nintendo Switch Online NES controllers that I have with my original NES. Speaking of internal Blue Retro adapters, it looks like Greg from LaserBear is currently working on one for the Dreamcast. If you didn't know, Greg has already created one for the GameCube, which is available for pre-order. He says here that because of space constraints, his adapter might need to be two separate PCBs, and they might need to have custom controller connectors created because there aren't any third-party ones available. I can't wait to hear more information about this adapter. I'm sure a lot of Dreamcast fans are really excited. I debated whether or not I should actually talk about this, but in the end, I think it's better that more people are aware of this issue so they can make their minds up for themselves. So what am I talking about? Retro Game Restore posted this tweet showing off some Blue Retro adapters that they received from a company that is going by the name Blue Retro. It actually seems like they've changed their Twitter handle to blue-retro.com, which is their actual website. But this company has nothing to do with Darth Cloud or the Blue Retro project at all. The fact that they're calling themselves Blue Retro is actually harmful and really misleading. It would be really easy for someone to think that this is an official Blue Retro account and that this is where the project is coming from. They even own that blue-retro.com domain, so people might think that they are an official website for Blue Retro. With that being said, I still think it's valuable to take a look at the products that they're selling. This adapter looks like it's going to be using the Universal Blue Retro framework, which will allow you to use a single ESP32 module with a bunch of different consoles. All you've got to do is swap out the controller connectors and it will work with those different consoles. I'm not even going to bother showing you the blue-retro.com website. It's really slow for me here in the United States. So let's just take a look at the AliExpress store that they have. They have two different listings. This one here sells the individual parts. Here you can see the Blue Retro core, which is that core that I was talking about, and you can see the ESP32 module there. Then you can see all of the different controller connectors that they have. So they have one for the Nintendo GameCube, the Sega Saturn, the PlayStation 1, the Dreamcast, the N64, the Genesis, the NES, and the Super Nintendo. So you can buy each of these parts individually here, or they have a second listing that actually is sort of like a bundle deal. You can get one controller connector and the core module together. So that's pretty much it. I think on paper, this is a really cool product. It's pretty inexpensive, and each of these adapters will allow you to use up to 2 controllers at once. If they rename their company and change their domain name, I would have no problem trying to support their products, but as it stands now, I can't get behind a company that tries to blatantly mislead people. If the idea of a universal Blue Retro adapter is appealing to you, then check out this one from GregTech here on Tindy. This one's known as the RetroRosetta. Unfortunately, it's out of stock right now. It wasn't when I made these notes and I was about to film this video. This one is set up a little bit differently than the ones from AliExpress. It has these GPIO looking pins up here that you connect these different controller connectors to. It has these like DuPont pin things in the top here. And what's more interesting is this one will work with up to 4 controllers. So you can max out an N64 and other consoles that have 4 controller ports. And while this project is a little bit more expensive than those ones from AliExpress, this is a legit way for you to use that universal firmware with your consoles. Some of you may have seen this project already, but this is the TinyNES from Tall Dog. As you can see in the picture here, it's kind of a clone NES that uses the original NES CPU and PPU just in a brand new motherboard and form factor. This project was crowdfunded by Crowd Supply, so let's go check out the project over there. Here we can see a picture of the complete enclosure, which is made out of FR4, which is the same material that you make PCBs out of, but you can see that there's 2 controller ports in the front as well as the cartridge slot. Here we can see the rear of the case, which has the standard NES composite and mono audio. We also have an on-off switch and a reset button. And it looks like you can use maybe the original NES power adapter here, but if you look in the rest of this article, it mentions that there's going to be some kind of a USB Type-C power adapter that's included. So that's interesting that they didn't put a USB-C port directly on this board here, but maybe there's a reason behind that. I can't find any pictures of that cable, so I'm not really sure what that's going to look like. Another thing that I thought was interesting is there's no CIC lockout chip in this at all, so you won't have to worry if you want to play unlicensed games in your tiny NES. It's available for pre-order now. There are 2 different variations, one that has genuine NES CPU and PPU chips, and the other one has clone CPU and PPU chips. One thing that is a little bit weird about this is it mentions that it's open source, but I don't see anything related to a GitHub repository or anything where you can find the source code or the Gerber files or anything to actually assemble one of these yourself. So if you have any information about that, or if you just want to share your thoughts about this tiny NES, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you didn't know, Retro World Expo was last weekend. I recorded 2 different panels, one from Lon Seidman about his journey of becoming a YouTuber, and the other one from Bob from Retro RGB, which was pretty much a panel Q&A section with a bunch of people from the Retro RGB community. I also recorded an interview with Dan from Pixel Effects, just talking about the state of current Pixel Effects mods as well as a roadmap of their future products. I'm going to leave a link to all those things in the description below. Also, I had the opportunity to talk with Greg from Laser Bear about the LCD PVM thing that I mentioned last week. Go ahead and take a listen. Is this that, I don't know what you had that like Project 21 inch or something? Is this the same? This is that? Or is it something else?
Is the same project, but unfortunately it is the conclusion of that project.
Right, because
it's not going to be a product.
Steve said that it was too expensive or you couldn't get the panels.
Couldn't get the panels is the biggest issue. Or I can get panels, it is a price point that nobody's going to be willing to spend on it.
$500 or something. Well, just the panel was $500 or something he said, right?
So in low quantities, I can get this panel, maybe another 5 or so panels at that $500
just
point.
Too hard to.
But I can get high quantities of another panel that's the same size, the same resolution, and it was going to be around $1,100 a panel.
Wow. But I mean, for people that were interested in it, you know, their quality is there, and so is the supply there for that. If people
At
wanted it.
$1,100 a panel, yes, there's supply.
Okay, interesting.
But actually producing it as an end product is going to be, you know, at a $1,500 point by the time it's done. So it's just not something that's viable in the marketplace.
Unfortunately, that's all the good audio that I recorded, but he mentioned a couple of other things, such as the resolution was going to be a little bit bigger than 1440p, as well as the enclosure that he had planned was going to be injection molded. The one that you saw in the video there was a 3D printed enclosure that he made specifically for the show. It's sad to see that this project was canceled, but at $1,500, I think it's pretty understandable. I was also able to see a couple of other things in person, such as his GBHD AIO shell, as well as that GameCube internal Blue Retro adapter in person. It was great talking with Greg this year. I hope I can see him again at next year's Retro World Expo. And for the big story, GameBox Systems has published their official roadmap for basically the next couple of years. Let's check it out. Okay, first we have a timeline of their currently announced consolizers. It looks like we're going to have the GBHD Advance SP going to be released on September 8th, as well as a restock of the current GBHD Advance. And it looks like they're going to be releasing that Game Gear consolizer, the GGHD, on September 22nd. Personally, I'm super excited for that Game Gear consolizer. I have a Game Gear just waiting to be turned into a consolizer. Next, let's take a look at what they're calling their Gen 2 consolizers. All these consolizers are going to be no solder, which I think is amazing. However, none of these Gen 2 consolizers are going to be available until at least 2023 or 2024. First, we know that they've already announced their Nintendo DS consolizer, the DS HD, and we know that that consolizer is going to be for the DS Lite variation of the DS. But now we have a couple of new announcements. It looks like the first one is the PlayStation Portable or PSP HD consolizer. I'm not sure which variation of the PSP that this consolizer is going to work with. Maybe they'll sort of announce which console it's going to be for. That way people can try to buy them before the consoles get really expensive to buy. But lastly, here we have a Nintendo 3DS consolizer called the 3DS HD. Again, I'm not sure which version of the 3DS this is going to work with. There are a bunch of different versions. One last interesting thing about these Gen 2 consolizers is that they're going to be using an HDMI transmitter IC, which they hope will eliminate screen compatibility issues, and these devices will be HDMI licensed and certified. I'm looking forward to those compatibility improvements because that's my #1 issue that I have with consolizers. Sometimes they don't work with some of my screens and they don't work with some of my capture cards. I can't wait to hear more information about these consolizers. 2024 can't come soon enough. That's it for this week. If you want to suggest a news story to me, follow me on Twitter or join the Discord. If you want to watch older retro modding news videos, you can check out this playlist here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.